work for a government agency, always looking for good, enthusiastic men to help us carry out our directives.
You're telling me that there is a movie company in Hollywood right now that is funded by the CIA?
I think probably Hollywood is full of CIA agents, and we just don't know it.
I mean, can you ever really trust another human being? No, the answer is you cannot.
You're either very smart or incredibly stupid.
Test. Everything's a test, remember? Nothing is what it seems.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the CIA and Hollywood. My name is Pierce Redman, and this is episode 15, Salt.
So today on the show, we're talking about Salt, the 2010 action thriller starring Angelina Jolie as Evelyn Salt, a CIA officer who is accused of being a Russian sleeper agent and then has to go on the run from her own agency. Basically, it's a Bourne film with Angelina Jolie as Jason Bourne. The rest of the storyline I can't really be bothered recounting, but it's mostly about Russia and nuclear weapons, and it's all okay, everything's all right in the end. And then right at the end of the film, it finishes with this really obvious setting it up for the sequel twist, where Salt, who has now been captured, is released from custody deliberately so she can go and hunt down the other Russian sleeper agents. So Pierce, what did you make of this one? What was your initial impression of this film?
I actually absolutely love this movie. In general, I really like Philip Noyce. I think he does great action films. He does any film he does is always good. But I actually saw this one in theaters when it came out and loved it at the time, just as a straight spy thriller. Everything about it. And I remember we were talking like a while back when we first were deciding to do this, and I was saying that I remember at the time this was when Inception came out, and I remember a lot of my friends thinking, "Oh man, Inception it's just so fucking good," and it's blah blah blah. And I remember seeing Inception and thinking and just hating it, almost walking out. And then I remember seeing Salt, and most of my friends thought, "Oh, it's silly. It's just whatever, Angelina Jolie and spies and who cares, Russian sleeper agents." And I remember me and my good friend Jack, we were very much we decided then that there were sort of two groups of people: the Salt people and the Inception people. And I've always been a proud Salt person, and we'll include it in the show notes. But I have this silly, ridiculous picture of me in the subway, and I had ripped down a giant Salt poster that had gotten kind of crumpled up. So there's this amazing picture of me holding it with this very silly mustache that I had at the time. But yeah, I love Salt. I always periodically check to see if there is going to be a sequel. Because I think they certainly wanted to make one, but it never really seemed to kind of take off. But yeah, I think it's actually a really as I said, Philip Noyce is a great filmmaker. And he we talked about him with A Quiet American, but of course, obviously, Clear and Present Danger, Patriot Games, The Bone Collector, which is another movie with Angelina Jolie, which is very good. Rabbit Proof Fence. He's done, more sort of unconventional films. But yeah, I think it's great. I think it's really good, and I think there's a lot in the movie that I think at the time it came out seemed a little silly. Particularly this whole, with the Russians and sleeper agents. But there's a lot of stuff happening in the news just as the movie was being finished and made that really did lend itself to there being quite a bit of truth in this. And now, of course, it's every day it's about the Russian. The Russians just, hacked the DNC, I guess, because, Putin and Trump are one and the same, according to a lot of people in the mainstream media. So it's all about Russia now. So I think this movie is actually very prescient in a lot of ways. And of course, it's also got Kurt Wimmer, who wrote The Recruit, or who at least put his name on the script for The Recruit. I love this movie.
No, sure. Kurt Wimmer, the thing was with him, I think he was the one who was brought in several years later, because the original script for The Recruit was written in maybe 97, like quite early on when Chase Brandon first took over at the ELO. And it was Roger Town who was kind of acting as the front for Chase Brandon at that time. And later, when they actually, found a studio and got this thing moving, I think Kurt Wimmer was brought in to kind of polish it up and maybe update a few little things. And I think he did actually have a fair bit of input into the script. So it is interesting to see him working on this one as well. I mean, like you, I like this film. I can't deny it. It's not the greatest film in the world, but it's a fast-paced, slick, fun, interesting action thriller. As far as spy thrillers go, this is up there, really, to be fair to it.
And not a lot of dialogue from Angelina. So it's not all that bad. She's actually quite good in this.
Yeah, she's not bad. She's not brilliant, but she's certainly not bad. I think the reason why there has never been a sequel is because she's lost interest. And they haven't, how could they make a sequel without her? It'd be very difficult to recast her role as someone else and expect to kind of buy into this. So I think because she's lost interest and she's now doing whatever, trying to save the world, it's probably not going to happen, which is disappointing. I'd like to see a sequel to this as well. And they did set it up well for the sequel. It was kind of obvious, but it's a good setup. It would make for a good film, you'd hope.
I think it'd make a great series. It would be. It is on like the level of a Bourne type series.
Well, this is the interesting thing about it. It's kind of the story of its production is actually, to me, more interesting than the film itself. I know you really want to get into the film, and we will, but I just thought we'd pick up on the story of like where this came from and how this developed, because it started out as another attempt by Sony to make their own Bourne franchise. And we know from the Sony hack that they are obsessed with Bourne. They want their own Bourne film. I know they're now sort of partly in control of the Bond film franchise, but they want an American spy series. That's what they want to make because they can see the profit in it. They can see the attention in it. So when this first was being developed in Sony, it was going to be a male lead. It was going to essentially be another Jason Bourne. And for a while, Tom Cruise was actually attached to this. But obviously he's working on Mission Impossible, and that's his CIA-sponsored spy film project, so I doubt he really needs another one. So that never happened. He's gone off with J.J. Abrams, and he's doing what he's doing. So then Amy Pascal, who has now left Sony, somewhat under a cloud, but at that time was one of the chief executives there, she suggested Angelina Jolie. And apparently the two of them had this conversation where they talked about, creating a female-based spy film series. And so Pascal suggested that she meet with Philip Noyce, and they discuss this and discuss rewriting the lead role as a woman. And so Kurt Wimmer, Philip Noyce, Lorenzo di Bonaventura, who is another name that turns up a lot in this world, they all went to Angelina Jolie's villa in France.
Of course.
To discuss reworking the film. And thus, the film that we now have was born. The CIA connections to this, which are obviously why we're discussing it, are strong. They're definitely there. Like you say, Noyce previously made Patriot Games. Liev Schreiber was in The Sum of All Fears. Angelina Jolie was in The Good Shepherd, all with the help of the CIA. The producers for Salt hired Melissa Boyle-Mealy, a former CIA operations officer. She was the technical advisor on this. But as Jolie mentions herself, they spoke to a lot of women at the CIA. And we found when we listened to the director's commentary on the DVD that Noyce even says they had some kind of video conference with CIA agents while they were, developing the script. So this wasn't just one of those where they hired someone who used to be in the CIA. This is one of those where they had full cooperation from the Public Affairs Office, the Entertainment Liaison Office. And I think this is important because in the last season, we pretty much looked at Chase Brandon films, not exclusively, but we covered that period pretty well, I feel. But this is one that comes from the period after that, the period that's covered by the Inspector General's report, sort of 2006 to 2012-ish. So you've got Zero Dark 30 and Argo, which obviously everyone knows about, and obviously we've already discussed. But I don't think a lot of people realize Salt was a full CIA-supported film.
No.
And so, yeah, it's another... We don't know a huge amount about that period. Most of the, the details in the Inspector General's report on what were the actual productions, most of that is either not included or it's just redacted. But this has got to be one of them. Because otherwise they couldn't have had this video conference. So yeah, it's a full CIA-assisted film, no doubt about it. And
well, there's even like some even more bizarre connections to the intelligence world that come up in the audio commentary that Philip Noyce does. And towards the very beginning, I thought, obviously, Philip Noyce talks about his father, who was in Z Special Force or Z Special Unit, which was the Australian OSS during World War II, and he trained Indonesian and Burmese guerrillas to fight the Japanese. So there's that connection, and I think, and Philip Noyce has said this in interviews, but also in this commentary, that's sort of what first got him. That's why he's made so many spy thrillers, and he even categorizes some of his other films as sort of proto spy thrillers, that they deal with something like surveillance or voyeurism, stuff like that. So he's always been really interested in that, and he said that kind of goes back to his father. But the more interesting thing is the extra that he talks about. Very early on in the movie, the opening of the movie starts with this pretty brutal torture sequence. And with really kind of old school waterboarding, that the waterboarding that they do to Angelina Jolie is that is like the original form of waterboarding that the Americans sort of popularized in the Philippines when they were fighting against the guerrillas there. But it's just, and she's being tortured. She's in North Korea. And I love, that was another thing. I love it's just like a cold open to the movie. There's no credits. The title the title for Salt, like the Salt title, doesn't come in until like 15 minutes into the movie. And then even then there's no, directed by. I love that in films. I think that's a great way. And I think it lends to the realism of the movie. It doesn't feel like you're watching a movie, even though it's Angelina Jolie. I think they do a really good job of taking all of the, and again, Liev Schreiber and Chiwetel Ejiofor, they really they take all of them and they really do seem like you're looking at movie stars, but you are able to kind of forget that for a little bit. And I think a lot of that has to do with the sort of the cold open of the movie. But anyway, in the audio commentary, and Tom, maybe you can explain, because I was a little confused exactly about what Philip Noyce was saying, but I found this even creepier than the fact that they had some sort of video conference call with 7 active undercover CIA operatives. But he says that during the exchange scene where, the CIA is exchanging Jolie for some North Korean spy, and they're at the border, the DMZ. Anyway, he said that one of the extras in that exchange scene was actually the son of a CIA agent. And Noyce says that that they were sort of, I think he was sort of talking about something, and he was sort of, I guess, asking the whole cast and crew, some blah, 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 and somehow it came up. And this guy said that his father worked on a fishing vessel that was registered in Spain, but so that he was able to go to places like North Korea and Cuba. And then he also said that this movie extra, also claimed that he worked as a border guard in South Korea. And as Noyce says, he became their unofficial on-set advisor, at least for this whole sequence. So that kind of weirded me out even more. Was this guy sent there? How many film extras go I wonder how many former border guards in South Korea whose fathers are CIA agents then go on to be an extra in a Hollywood film.
let alone a Hollywood film about the CIA sponsored by the CIA.
Yeah, so that's I found that to be very odd, and how sort of forthright this guy was with divulging. Oh yeah, my dad's CIA. You know, uses a fishing vessel registered out of Spain. I mean, it was almost like I was expecting Philip Noyce to say like, oh, and his name is Bob something.
No, sure. I know where you're going with this. It's a very odd thing for him to actually admit to. I mean, the guy on set himself to actually say this. I can only assume, I mean, his father's presumably retired now, but even then, it's like, yeah, but you're an extra. You're in the entertainment industry. Your name and face is out there. If people wanted to find out who your father was, they probably could. I mean, if we really wanted to.
Yeah, I know. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, we should have.
It doesn't really matter, because, whatever, but it is a strange thing to have this go on. But the way Philip Noyce tells it, this was just some weird coincidence that they, I mean, presumably they got this guy because he had some knowledge of Korean border, whatever practices, the whole situation there. That's how he ended up as an extra on this film, as opposed to anyone else. But the coincidence of his father being in the CIA and this whole thing about shipping and, registering a ship in a certain place so that it's not part of one block or another and therefore can travel around. Yeah. Bizarre. I've never heard another story like, I mean, we've listened to a lot of directors' commentaries and interviews, watched a lot of making ofs. We've never come across anything like this.
No, yeah. I mean, that just sort of, I almost fell out of my chair when I was listening when he starts talking about that. At first I thought, oh, maybe he's one of the Korean ones. Maybe he was a Korean extra. And I was
apparently not. No, he was on the American side.
Right, yeah. No, exactly. Very strange. Very strange. And again, I only imagine he was there for a reason,
If he wasn't, it's the most astonishing coincidence we've ever come across in this whole...
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, let's get into the film itself a bit more, because, I mean, I do want to talk about the relevance and the significance of a female lead in a spy film. This was clearly something that happened during the production, that this started out as a male lead and they turned it into this. Because, as we've said before, this is a male-dominated genre in terms of characters and in terms of the audiences watching. But in recent years, and Salt, again, was one of the earlier examples of this, one of the prescient films in this respect, have incorporated spy protagonists who are female. And we've talked about this before. I don't want to rehash everything we've already said before. Basically, we came up with the idea that this is partly about recruiting more women, particularly in black operations, but also probably about giving the CIA a different image, because women can be used to sell things that men can't, to put it bluntly. People will forgive a woman saying or doing something that they would not forgive in a man, particularly in a PR context. And I'm not saying the opposite isn't also true. It absolutely is. But this is the point. If you want to sell certain things, sometimes a woman is better than a man. And it just made me think when I was rewatching this film and dwelling on this again, that, about a month or so ago, people were going on about how terrible it all was and how we were going to get Boris Johnson in number 10 and Donald Trump in the White House. But what we've actually got is Theresa May in number 10. Still may end up with Hillary in the White House.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that scares me more. Because, like I say, a female figure, a female icon, a female totem, whatever, can be used to sell, in some ways, much worse things than a man can. And you've got to wonder if the establishment has got some really ugly stuff up its sleeve that they're going to be trying to implement in the next few years. Maybe we'd actually be better off with Boris Johnson and Donald Trump. No, I'm not going to say that, but you know where I'm going with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think there's that weird maternalistic kind of nature that people, even though I think Hillary Clinton, rightfully so, doesn't have much of a mother-like figure because she is such a nut job and has no problem with.
I'd be surprised if even Chelsea Clinton thinks that she's much of a.
Yeah. But I think in a general sense, there is that, a woman could never push the button to launch the nukes, like women are somehow more caring. And I think you can, as you were saying, kind of get a pass with certain things. What's her name? Samantha Power, who is now is the UN ambassador for the US. She is a despicable person who advocates some of the most insane, really scary side of liberal interventionism is embodied in Samantha Power. And her husband and the whole group of these stuck-up liberal professors all sort of advocate is really scary stuff, particularly like in Africa, like places like Rwanda and Congo. But Samantha Power is sort of seen as this wonderful, loving, caring person. And I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that she is a woman. And there is this weird projection that many people put onto women, in power even, that they, if it was a guy, they would be, he's an asshole. He's doing these horrible things in wherever, Libya or Iraq or something. But it's less so with women. And I think Hillary Clinton kind of breaks that mold because, she, laughs out loud when Gaddafi is getting sodomized on camera. But I know what you mean. I think that, and I think especially with the CIA, it's a even Kerry, like in Homeland, kind of comes across like that at times.
Yeah.
And of course, this movie in Salt, very interesting. The CIA director is a woman.
Yes.
Which I don't think we're ever going to see in anytime soon.
I wouldn't have thought so.
No.
I think they will very much keep that as something that they encourage in films and TV shows, but it won't become a reality. But this is kind of the point, isn't it? That you look at Theresa May and Hillary Clinton, neither one of them are bringing a new kind of politics. Neither one of them are bringing a more feminine kind of politics, are they? They're doing exactly the same things that the men in their party would be doing in the same position. So what difference does it fucking make? I don't mean to be kind of make any big issue out of this, but you know what I mean? People have this attachment to identity politics where because this person is perceived to be this thing or is actually this thing, whether it be racial, gender, whatever, come from this country, come from that place, it doesn't really matter. People attach so much to that. But when you look at break it down to actual politics and policy, like I say, sometimes the women actually end up selling worse policies than some of the men. And yeah, it's just kind of disappointing in a way. You might have hoped that the chance of a female president might actually offer something a bit different, but if anything, it's offering a worse version of what we've already got. So, one in the eye for the progressives, I guess. What else did you want to pick out of this? Actually, there was one scene. This is the only scene really in the film that kind of bothers me or pisses me off a little bit. And that's when when Angelina Jolie first gets accused of being this Russian sleeper agent and the CIA stick her in a cell. She takes off her underwear and uses it for the CCTV camera. And I felt that's a little bit kind of adolescent boyish. That's clearly one about trying to sexualize this for the guys in the audience. I just felt it was a bit cheap and beneath an otherwise quite clever and quite well put together movie. I don't know.
Yeah, that one actually also kind of jumped out at me. Two things. One, I was like, would you actually do that? And then part of me thought, I guess, like, what else does she have? She's not wearing, like, I don't know, socks or pantyhose or something like that. But there was, of course, it's not just, like, regular underwear. It's, like, lacy, it's like a lacy thong. And then B, I couldn't help but think, until she got back to her apartment, she's just got no underwear on the whole time.
We never see her put any underwear back on.
No, I guess we don't. No. But
we've got to assume not to.
Well, she puts on pants. I'm sure she, put on some underwear. But
took 5 seconds to throw some more.
That is a weird.
It is a bit kind of. Have they only just put that in there to kind of like I say, get the teenage boys in the audience a bit excited, or?
I think a little bit, yeah. I think, I mean, I don't know, maybe we could get kind of more out there and wonder, I don't know, it's, like the underwear represents her gender and she's putting it in, I don't know, maybe there's some weirder, deeper meaning about women in the CIA and, the underwear representing her sex and she's covering up the I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of getting, this is reminding me of the sandwich in The Social Network.
No, we could get too hung up on this.
But yeah, no, that was
isn't a podcast.
That definitely, to me, that actually seemed like something that like the studio put in. That didn't seem like something that Philip Noyce or that Angelina Jolie would be into. I mean,
well,
maybe.
What I mean. That's what I mean. It kind of stands out as a moment that doesn't quite fit with the tone of the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is otherwise not really sexy at all.
No.
A film with a supposedly sexy Hollywood star in the middle of it. That's like the only moment.
No
Maybe
sex.
that's it. Maybe it's because there's no sex in it. They said you've got to throw in something for the teenage boys, and so they
right. Yeah. Right. No. Right. Yes. Have Jolie
one
take her underwear.
for throwing her underwear in your face.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, maybe. I think there has to be some sort of sex quotient in all Hollywood films, especially action movies. Even if it's like just a stupid shot of that they go to a strip club or something. There has to be at least like an ass or something. That is a weird one because then you're just sort of thinking it's like she's just running around doing all this stuff with no underwear on. And that's not necessarily, I think, what they want you to be thinking. You're supposed to be feeling for these characters, and you're trying to, oh man, what is Evelyn going to do next? But then you're also kind of like in that scene in the taxi, then, and the taxi driver is looking at her through the rearview mirror, and she's sort of like hunched all the way down. It's like, was he trying to, sneak peek?
Yeah.
That is
there was that kind of little, just sort of weird little pervert element that they threw in.
Yeah.
For otherwise no obvious reason. But what else? I mean, I'm sure you've got plenty of notes in front of you. What else?
Oh yeah.
Aside from the Russian thing, which we'll get into in a minute, but what did you want to pick out?
Well, I just I love the Philip Noyce action movies because they always kind of have something that you haven't seen before. So this is really stupid, but the taser driving is genius. I remember in the theaters when that happened, me and my friend Jack were just like, this is so fucking good. Like, no one's ever done that before. That's like a first in a movie. But she's basically tasering the ever-living shit out of this poor cop in the car. And every time she tasers him, he involuntarily jams on the gas. And somehow she's even able to make him turn and, hit reverse and all that stuff. But I just love that. I love that sequence. But, on a more serious note, there are a couple little, sort of interesting things, and so maybe we'll stray away from the Russian stuff for a moment. But I did two things. One, I love that the Rink Petroleum, which is this front company, and they have this huge ass building in Washington D.C. They're like in the center of D.C. You can see There's a sequence where you see the Rink Petroleum and then you see the Washington Monument. And I found this interesting because generally speaking in these sorts of movies, she would just work directly at Langley. That we would have there is no famous sequence of Langley. Langley is never really mentioned. There's nothing specific to that, which I found interesting. And also the idea that, so the front company is right in the middle of DC. And I sort of, at first I thought, oh, that's stupid. Like, why? But then I sort of wondered, how many are there really? I wonder, is that something that, Wimmer or Noyce were sort of told? And it just sort of made me wonder, even in the heart of Washington, D.C., where everybody's got a building, every government agency, every NGO, every foundation, blah, blah, blah. They've all got a building. But even that, the CIA still got a front company. And it just seems sort of odd to me that it would be right in the center of DC, but then it's sort of, I guess it's not.
No, I don't.
And for all intents and purposes, it's just like a mini version of Langley.
Yeah.
It's not like they're specific to something. You know, you could, I guess they're, obviously it's a petroleum company, so I'm sure they're able to get, you know, it makes sense. You go all over the Middle East, Venezuela, South China Sea, all the places that you'd want to go, Central Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to have a petroleum company, but I don't know. It just seemed like it wasn't like a specific like operations thing. So I don't know. I don't know anything on that time. It was an interesting.
Well, now that you brought it up, yeah, what I'm thinking is that, I mean, for dramatic purposes, they've got to have her in a building in the middle of Washington so that when she breaks out, she's on the street running through the streets of Washington. Because, you know, you break out of Langley, you're, you know,
in the middle of nowhere.
You're in a forest in Virginia.
Yeah.
So you can't really do that cinematically, or clearly they didn't want to. They wanted this to be very much an urban setting for a film. So, but they could have just had her in a CIA office or another building or any number of places.
Mm.
But no, they specifically chose a big petrol company as a front for the CIA. It is a curious production decision. And yeah, I can only guess this is something they're playing on, that they've probably heard, or at least on the grapevine, yeah, the CIA has a few offices in the middle of DC and they're hidden under the guise of being companies that you've never really heard of and you don't know what they do.
Right.
They're a petroleum company. Well, that could mean any number of things. Are they looking for it? Are they
analysts?
Are they traders? All sorts of stuff. So therefore, you've got an excuse for lots of different sorts of people to be wandering in and out of that building. It does make sense. I don't know if this is based on a real building or a real company, but there's probably things just like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I and then the other thing, and I don't know, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit on this, but there's this like weird transhumanist thing going on with Salt that I didn't really pick up on, I think, until kind of recently. And you had sort of alluded to something like that to me in like one of our emails or something. But I don't know if you want to wait to get to that, but
No, we might as well get into that whole thing now. Yeah.
Well, I guess there is this weird transhumanist thing that kind of starts sort of, you know, it kind of starts off innocently enough, and it almost kind of goes to you know, when she's trying to escape. This Russian guy, some sort of FSB spy master, kind of walks in to Rink Petroleum too, which is interesting. He doesn't walk into Langley. He
doesn't walk into the embassy. Yeah.
Yeah. He walks into Rink Petroleum. So, you know, I guess they're not hiding it too well. And he, you know, he says, oh, there's a Russian sleeper. He's going to kill the Russian president at the funeral for the recently deceased vice president. And he says, oh, and Salt, Evelyn Salt, that's the person's name who's going to do this. So they lock up Salt, and then she escapes, and she's within the building, and she's like on like an empty floor that they have, and she's trapped, and this is the panty sequence. But I felt like that was the sort of beginning of the transhumanist thing, where she basically like MacGyvers up some sort of crazy
fire extinguisher, rocket launcher.
Yeah, which is like silly, but it's still done in a way where you're like, no, of course that would totally work. You know, like she's CIA. They have to know how to do these things with, you know, chairs and tissue paper. But anyway, other than that, there's like, she definitely has some sort of Matrix style fighting, you know, where she like runs up the side of a wall and, you know, triple kicks some guy, or, there's one where she like flies through the air almost to like knee some guy in the chest. So, I mean, and they definitely had to do this with wires and stuff. So they sort of introduced that kind of stuff. And then there's when she's jumping, like, down the elevator shaft in the presidential bunker.
Yeah.
That was like, no way. Like, no one can do that. That was some crazy, like, you know, she's been given some sort of superhuman strength. And then, of course, obviously, she becomes a man to gain access to the White House, which is a very, you know, transhumanist, and she becomes a man and then takes off the facial stuff, but keeps on the male hair. So she's again that weird transhumanist sort of androgynous.
Yeah, we should be clear here for anyone who hasn't seen the movie. We don't mean she actually has the operation. We mean she's wearing a rubber mask.
Yeah.
Very, very convincing sort of silicone mask to make her look like a man, and a wig and clothes and the rest of it. And this is, of course, just like in Mission Impossible, another CIA-sponsored film franchise that features the same technology quite prominently. And quite, that's kind of like it's one of its signature, scenes. And this just reminds me of Argo. Because you remember when we were looking into Argo and we were watching that video with, I think it was the one where Tony and John Mendes were giving a presentation at a university or whatever it was. And John Mendes mentioned that the CIA does actually have this technology, that they have actually developed this super convincing silicone or otherwise kind of rubbery mask that will completely change your facial appearance. And that, didn't she tell some anecdote about how when she was actually on some presidential briefing, she was there in one of these masks.
With talking to Reagan.
Yeah. And she pulls it off partway through to, shock everyone.
Yeah.
And you can't help but think, and this is more or less what we're seeing in Salt. The CIA has some kind of weird obsession with this. Not just with transhumanism, which I do think the CIA is somewhat into, perhaps not as much as the Pentagon, who really are obsessed with turning their soldiers into robots and drones, but the CIA has elements of that. Different, a different sort of expression in this case, different manifestation, but the same sort of ideas. And I can only guess that this was something they encouraged, just because, John Mendes, Mission Impossible, and now Salt. You just think, this is something the CIA wants to see in movies. This is clearly something they are encouraging movie makers to incorporate for whatever reason. I'm not really, possibly just to sort of wind people up, make you think, is this person in a mask? Am I actually the person I think I am? Is it just, I don't mean again, necessarily for us public, but I mean like other
You can't trust anyone. Anyone could wear a mask.
Anyone could actually be a man rather than a woman, or vice versa.
Well, I think Philip Noyce says again in the commentary, one of the things that that they learned through talking with the CIA operatives was that, they all had like a go bag. And I forget, they used a different term, Noyce was told. But, it's this bag with, passports and money, guns. But he said that one of the things that they always made sure they had was their masks. They would have at least one, if not more, of these really convincing prosthetic masks that they could put on and, blend in or disappear. So it's interesting that
presumably the passports would match the mask.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd get through an airport or whatever.
Right. Which is, it's funny because you think like, how could that ever work? But apparently the CIA is that good. And the one that Angelina Jolie wears is actually pretty good.
Well, yeah, I mean, in one of the making ofs, you get to see kind of how this whole thing was put together, and it is pretty impressive, actually, to be fair to you.
Yeah.
It did, I mean, the first time I watched this film, unlike you, I didn't see this back in 2010 or anything. I didn't watch this, I think, until last year, but, and also just to pick up on your point, I hated Inception as well.
Yeah.
And I hated the way everyone that summer just would not shut the fuck up about it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, when I first saw this film last year, I must have not been paying all that much attention, because for a minute there, I was thinking, who's this guy that they've now introduced into this film? And then I twigged quickly. But yeah, you miss a moment, or it was probably late at night or whatever. And it is very, very convincing. It's very, very well done. The only thing they couldn't really do was, they couldn't really do anything about Jolie's kind of really big, mushy lips. But nonetheless, it's impressive technology, if nothing else. And you have to think, is the CIA really that good? Probably. They've been working on this stuff for a long time. So, yeah, maybe they are. But before we get on to Russia, was there anything else you wanted to grab out? Because I think Russia's one of the big fish. Kind of.
I think that's kind of the meat and potato. I think most of my other notes are kind of about Russia. I will say another interesting thing is that I think this movie in a lot of ways popularized is the no subtitles. for all of whenever they're speaking Russian, there are no subtitles. And that's something that we've seen now in Homeland quite a bit. There are no subtitles. And I've seen that happening more and more in spy thrillers, where they don't translate what they're saying. And it's interesting in this because with the Salt stuff, I mean, that's like integral backstory. You know, like when Evelyn does finally meet up with, her handler, this psychotic FSB agent who basically kidnapped her when she was a baby and, trained her as this crazy assassin. They're speaking in Russian the whole time. And you can kind of pick out their little tiny words here and there that you can kind of figure out what they're saying. But they don't translate anything.
No.
So I found that interesting as a sort of, again, that kind of like, I mean, it's very deliberate. And again, Philip Noyce doesn't put stuff in his movies just to do it. He's not that kind of director. So that was a very deliberate thing. And I wonder if is that sort of that element of the Russians are, they're scary. They're the unknown.
Yeah, there's some sort of alien or at least other thing that's out there that we don't understand. And to be honest, we don't understand Russians that well.
No, we don't at all.
One of the problems of geopolitics is that most people don't really understand Russia, and they're an enormous country with massive influence and relevance to so much. So it does.
And I don't think that Philip Noyce is necessarily doing it as like in like a propaganda, we should be afraid of the Russians sort of a thing.
I think from his perspective, it was probably more dramatic than propagandistic. Yeah.
Well, I'll say too, in the commentary, he says that, there were a lot of Russians that didn't like the movie, and they filmed in Russia. He's been to Russia many times. He used to go to the Moscow Film Festival all the time. But he said, to any Russians that may be listening to this audio commentary, we make it sound like, oh, it's the Russian sleepers. He says point blank, I know that the Americans had 10 times as many sleepers all around, not just Russia, but all around the world. So don't feel too bad if it makes you guys look, paints you in a bad light, right now. But yeah, that was just an interesting thing. And again, as I said, the no subtitles has become, I think it's a way of dehumanizing,
alienating the audience from the character. Yeah,
right. It could be anything.
Can't understand
terrorist, whatever. Yeah, Russian spy master. We don't understand them. We don't even need to understand them.
Don't know them. Don't want to know them.
Yeah, but it just frustrated me because I want to know what the hell they were saying.
No, I know what you mean. I find that with a lot of modern films where you're like, I know I don't strictly need to know what these words are, and I can kind of follow along for dramatic purposes, but if you're going to put in words in a language that no one in the audience speaks, you might want to throw up a subtitle or two.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there are going to be quite a few people who get a bit frustrated with that. And it did also interest me that her whole backstory, Salt's whole backstory, is virtually the same as Black Widow from the Avengers. Which I don't know if they're ever actually going to make an origin story for her, but it has been kind of mooted. I don't know if it's actually going ahead. But it is I suppose it's a story. It's quite a common story in old Cold War spy literature. This whole notion of someone being taken by the Russians, taken away from their family, and trained from a ludicrously young age to just be an agent of the state. And I'm not denying that the Soviet Union did this. They certainly did. But at the same time, like we were talking in the last episode, there's that weird scene where Maya and Leon Panetta are discussing how she was recruited out of high school. And that's a bit older, but it's still 16. You're pretty vulnerable and,
definitely
influenced a lot when you're 16. So it's not that far off. I don't know if the CIA recruit 5-year-olds. Maybe they do, but maybe they do actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're certainly funding people that in other countries that recruit or kidnap
child soldiers.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not totally out of the question.
But the thing, I mean, you're right. The big thing about Russia is just how early this film was. Because obviously these days, every spy film and every spy series out there has some kind of Russian angle to it. If not, that's the main angle to it. But this film was made in like 2009, 2010, and may even have been written earlier than that.
Mm.
And just to put this in context for people, that's 3 to 4 years before this whole reigniting of the Cold War. The Ukraine Revolution didn't take place until February 2014, and the annexing of Crimea was the following month. This film is like 4 years before that. So they were there before most people were. The only other major film or TV series before this, like during the 2000s, which kind of focused on Russia in a major way, was season 7 of Spooks, which does very much push a lot of the same ideas and a lot of the same themes and this whole notion of a resurgent, reborn Russian threat. So, but yeah, Salt got there before anyone else except Spooks, and Spooks really is like, you know, the show that predicts the future, or was in that decade anyway. But where did you want to go with this whole prescience about the new Cold War, or whatever we're calling it?
Well, I mean, obviously, this movie also coincided with the illegals program being discovered, and this is the Russian intelligence. This is Anna Chapman. For people that may not know what the illegals program is, this was, a pretty wide-ranging spy operation where Anna Chapman and others were sending information back to Russia. That many of them lived in New York City or in Westchester County, where they also filmed portions of this movie.
So
and Philip Noyce talks about that in the commentary too, and he didn't believe it. I think he was sent an article by Kurt Wimmer about this, and he thought, "Oh, you're just did you get this like off the Onion or something?" But it does in a lot of ways mimic what happens, some of the general idea of SALT, and like I don't know about Anna Chapman in particular, but there are people in the illegals program that had been here for years and had and they lived these very normal, kind of mundane, boring lives in the suburbs, and they were also seducing people, stealing information, sending stuff back to and obviously I think it's a bit PR, but I mean Anna Chapman is like a national hero in Russia.
Yeah, she's got her own TV show.
Yeah. And yeah, and got, rumored to have had an affair with Putin and whatnot. So, definitely the people in the illegals program were not just, these were not throwaway agents. So that's bizarre in and of itself.
Yes.
But, I think again, it's just so bizarre that when I saw this, I thought, who the hell the Russians? Like, what are they going to do? Nothing. Like, it seemed ridiculous. It seemed like when I saw it at the time that they were kind of trying to push that narrative, and I just could not accept it.
And just again to put this in a little bit of context for people, it was only a couple of years earlier that you get the film Burn After Reading with CFR George Clooney.
Mm.
And in that, these two bumbling idiots, played by Brad Pitt and the actress from Fargo, whose name I can't remember, they accidentally get this like CIA guy's memoir, and they take it to the Russian embassy. And you see this scene inside the CIA building where a guy tells his supervisor about this, and the guy just goes, "The Russians? Why would they go to the Russians?" So, like, at that point, the whole notion of the Russians being some serious intelligence adversary was being lampooned. It's only a couple of years later that we get SALT, and the whole thing is reborn as the new Cold War.
Yeah, I know that's an interesting idea too. I think in a lot of even going back to like the early 90s or the 80s, where the Russians were the adversary, but they're always portrayed in those movies as a little backwards. Their technology is always a little out of date. Mm-hmm. They don't have they have crappy offices, and they are many times kind of seen as this sort of bumbling fools.
Sort of second-rate failing superpower.
Right, yeah. Whereas nowadays it's, oh no, I mean the Russians are, they're hacking us every day. there's the Russians are under your bed. They're hiding everywhere. They're controlling the U.S. election. Blah blah blah. Putin controls Trump. They're dead set on world domination and controlling the Middle East and blah blah blah. And they turn it around and they're encircling NATO.
By existing.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, just by existing, Yeah, well, their country is where all of our NATO bases are.
And where all of our new NATO bases want to be. I mean, they're getting in the way, Pierce. They're really getting...
Right, yeah, exactly.
They're the aggressors.
So it's funny, that sort of 180. And I think it's funny, too, that the 180 also comes from they're idiots, like Reagan defeated them because they, commies can't run an economy, so we just ran them into the ground, It's like, well, I always find that excuse kind of ridiculous. Like, so we literally outspent them? Like, they were that stupid that they just, spent too much on their...
trying to keep up with the Joneses? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right, and that sort of just doesn't talk about, well, what about that war that we started in Afghanistan, funding Al-Qaeda and selling heroin.
Or about the fundamental corruption of the Soviet system, which didn't really have a huge amount to do with them being communist.
Yeah.
It had something to do with that, I guess, or at least that was the hypocrisy, that if you have a communist system but you still obviously have a ruling class, then sooner or later people are going to twig this and faith in the system is going to fail. But all of these were factors. Yeah, and I know what you mean. People love attributing some great success to Reagan and a bit to Thatcher as well, and you just think Reagan and Thatcher did not bring down the Soviet Union. To be honest, it was mostly internal forces rather than external ones that I think brought down the Soviet Union. Not exclusively, but to a large extent. That just the notion of Russia trying to run a, late 20th century going into the 21st century empire like that was kind of tenuous.
Yeah.
They've always had this kind of problem with running an empire from Russia, that they've already got an empire just in the country itself. So whenever they try and expand, they do tend to overreach, and sooner or later that comes back on them. There is that dynamic at play as well. There's a lot going on with why the Soviet Union fell and why it did when it did. So, no, I know what you mean. There is a whole mythology around that that's kind of a load of bollocks. But, I mean, one thing I wanted to bring out just on this was the name of the film itself, Salt. Because surely this is a reference to the SALT talks.
I didn't even think about that.
Oh, well, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, this was the Cold War era strategic arms limitation talks, the SALT talks, they're mostly known as. And this led to the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in the 60s, early 70s. And there was another agreement on the table in 1979 at the second set of talks called SALT II, which would, of course, be the sequel to this film. But this second agreement was never actually ratified because the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, which we'd kind of set them up to do.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure they did not pick this rather unusual name for a spy, SALT. That's an odd name for a spy film and for a spy character, and I'm pretty sure they picked it for that reason. And when you see the word SALT, it's almost always in capital letters, like with the SALT talks. So it's got to be a reference.
Yeah, you're right.
So they're playing, there's lots of different dimensions to this, where they are playing on this kind of rebirth of the old Cold War narrative. And again, whether they're doing that primarily for propagandistic purposes or for dramatic purposes, we're not sure. And it may depend among different people in the production crew as to where their motives lie. Like you, I want to forgive Philip Noyce and think this was mostly because he just wanted to make a rip-roaring spy film.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe we're wrong about that, but yeah, for the time being, we're going to defend and apologize for him.
It's on that same level, something that, again, didn't make much of an impact the first time I saw it, but, having rewatched it several times, is that the Russian president in the film is called, Matviev, and, of course, Right, just like the president of Russia at that time, Medvedev.
Medvedev.
Yeah.
Either now.
Yeah, I know. But very similar sounding names. And again, Medvedev at the time was again sort of this bumbling fool. That's how he's always been portrayed in politics. He's just sort of Putin's lackey. And I believe 2010, this would have been when he was ostensibly the leader of Russia. When Putin sort of took a vacation for a little while. And was definitely someone that was expendable. He's somebody that nobody really believed was in power, No,
everyone just saw him as some sort of gopher for Putin and Putin's people. Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, Putin kind of came back. I guess he wasn't. I don't know what really to make of that weird interim period. I think it was. I mean, something had to be going on there. But anyway, that was an interesting thing. Another thing too that kind of struck me, and maybe this is sort of true, but in movies, Russian presidents never have wives. Have you noticed that?
I had not noticed that. No,
they never. You never see a Russian president with and you'll see these big, movies where they, like I don't know, like Air Force One, and he's in Russia and his wife is there, but I don't think the Russian president has a wife. You never see a wife; they're never mentioned. And I don't know, maybe this is somewhat true. Putin's ex-wife never, is never featured anywhere. They obviously had a very, strained relationship. But Putin did have a wife. He's got daughters. I mean, he's very, secretive about them. He doesn't, he allows them their privacy or whatever. But, there must be Russian presidents that had wives, right?
Well, yeah, there were, but it's never really been part of... But then, was it really in our countries until maybe... in the 70s, did anyone
Jackie Kennedy?
Jackie Kennedy may be the first one, but did anyone give a damn about Gerald Ford's wife or Jimmy Carter's wife? Not that I really recall.
No, but I guess it's just even like at ceremonial things, No,
I know what you're saying. There is this kind of absence. This strange kind of space where the wife should be in these.
But perhaps that really is like an American and maybe to a lesser extent British type thing. Because I guess you never
something British have only picked up on recently is the whole absence of the Prime Minister's wife. No one gave a damn about
Right. No, I was just gonna say. I don't know who Xi Jinping's wife is. I don't think she I don't think the Chinese people necessarily care.
No, I don't think they do. On the whole,
but I don't know. I guess I think there's something to that in movies. Again, it makes them seem scary. Mm-hmm. They don't have wives. It's like we would, in America, you'd never be the president if you were a bachelor,
let alone if you were gay.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, right. Yeah, obviously, if you didn't have a wife and you're running for president, first thing is, he's gay.
Yeah.
No, and then, worst case, was he going to be dating people? Is women going to come in and out of the White House?
Wouldn't be the first time.
No, of course not. But
John F. Kennedy was married, and it didn't stop.
Yeah. But, no, I think it's got that weird, that otherworldly quality. And there's just something weird and creepy about seeing a world leader I'd say something like a funeral and his wife isn't with him,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I know what you're saying, yeah. And I do think there is, it's also, I think, particular with the Russian thing, because when have Russian women ever really featured in cinema at all, in any form, let alone a spy film? They're not really present very much, or very, very rarely. I'm struggling to think of one. Marina Oswald.
I think only as sort of eye candy,
Oh yeah. You've had Russian women as sex objects, just like you would have any other woman in a film. But she's not really sexy because she's Russian. She's just a sexy woman who happens to be Russian.
Right.
Whereas the actual relevance of Russian women is kind of almost completely ignored in Hollywood. But then it is in most of the spy literature. Like when you read books about, Soviet defectors and what have you, there were female defectors as well, but no one writes about them. And it's actually very, very difficult to find out any information on them, even in well-sourced historical books. They're just kind of overlooked. They're a footnote in history, it seems. So, yeah.
No, yeah. Or if they are mentioned, it's always in the context of, of course the KGB was training them all to be basically prostitutes, They're like women in Russia were only spies so that they could be part of some sort of honey trap. And America never did that. We never used prostitutes, never trained women in, seduction and things like that. It's only just the Russians that do that. So again, even when they are mentioned, it's always as a sex object. So yeah, I think to kind of bring that back into perspective with Salt, I think there are a lot of little elements in this movie that have now since been kind of teased out into bigger, they've become sort of like mainstays of the new Cold War spy thriller genre. Which is interesting because I think most people kind of don't even know that Salt exists as a movie.
No, it's kind of an overlooked movie in that respect. Yeah. But you're right, it sets a huge amount of the standards and expectations of the modern, 2010s spy thriller, whether that be film or TV, really. And makes it all the more disappointing that there isn't a sequel, because they really, really could have capitalized on this now.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I guess also, again, the Cold War thing we haven't talked about is that NATO is mentioned prominently in the movie. Which
is very unusual for film.
Never, ever, ever mentioned. I think the only other big kind of thing like that, again, would be Homeland. Where
certainly recently, yeah. I mean, they are mentioned quite a bit in the November Man, but no one has seen the November.
No one's seen it. Yeah, exactly.
It's a pretty low-level film as far as attention goes. So, yeah, in terms of like really big budget, high-profile stuff, yeah, the only other one that I can think of recently is Homeland. But NATO get ignored in press coverage. They get ignored in geopolitical analysis. People love to talk in terms of, the British, the Americans, or even the Anglo-American alliance. It's like, what you're really talking about here is NATO, isn't it? But you're afraid to fucking say it. Mm-hmm. That's kind of, it's like in East Germany, you know what I mean? People don't even want to mention that this thing exists because they're so terrified of what might happen. It's bizarre, the hold that NATO has over people, given that it is arguably the world's most powerful organization.
Definitely.
Or one-off, anyway. One-off.
Yeah. Oh, no. Certainly. Oh, I know. When you think about, it's sort of conspiracy culture and, the Trilateral Commission and those sort of things. And it's like, yeah, those are important. But I would arguably, you could say NATO's made much more significant world-changing policies than, the fucking Trilateral Commission.
I would certainly say so, yes.
Even
in a more tangible way.
Yeah, exactly.
Identified. This wouldn't have happened if NATO didn't exist.
Yeah. So, and even just like on a societal level, the way our culture has gone. Arguably, you could say NATO had a huge impact on all of that. I mean, this is this is a very topical sort of thing, but just today. As we're recording this on the 26th of July, there's another horrific attack. A priest was executed at a church in France, and this is just like the latest in this week's sort of horror stories thing. But nowhere in any of these discussions, we got to get rid of the immigrants and blah blah blah. Is you got rid of their home originally. No one's saying to get rid of NATO. It's just, I guess, send all these immigrants back to their bombed out homes. I know that that's not the ultimate necessarily reason, but that's a major factor here. And again, nobody wants to say that. All of these, I'm getting a little off topic, but like Brexit and all that kind of right wing fanaticism. But they, Farage said we got to leave the EU so we can protect NATO.
Yes. He sees this
So,
as
yeah.
a pro-NATO thing.
Yeah, right. So obviously, yeah, I think so again, the mere fact that that NATO is mentioned in this movie, and even more scary, it's the Russians are infiltrating NATO.
Mhm.
You know, this sleeper has been, I think he's pretending to be like a Czech military attaché who, you know, briefs the president on NATO, which is so like weird when you think about, you know, so you've got a Czech guy who works for a global military alliance, but lives in Washington, D.C. to brief the president.
Yeah.
And he turns out he's really Russian. You know, it's just one of those weird sort of, you know, yeah, that's globalism. But I think again, it's and now that's like, I think kind of commonplace. Now, if someone were to come out and say the Russians are trying to get into NATO, it'd be, oh yeah, of course.
Mm.
You know, because
Well, it's like Topaz all over again.
that's that was actually what I thought about was Topaz.
This whole notion of there being this deep-seated Russian spy ring at a very high level within, you know, Western intelligence and implicitly or explicitly within NATO itself. Yeah. It's... Maybe there is. I mean, we're not kind of ruling that out.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
Russian-
Yeah, of course.
Russian
The same way
intelligence
that...
is capable of some pretty astonishing things, but at the same time, there is this kind of element of paranoia politics to all of this, that it's like, right, so you're only going to bring up NATO as some kind of Russian target?
Yeah.
As though NATO is the innocent victim here? I mean, come off it.
Right.
And again...
No, of course. And he's a suicide bomber in the movie.
Which is very odd.
Yeah. Wow, how does he even get the bomb in there?
I don't remember that actually being explained. I think that's one of those things that this film, because it's only about 90 minutes long and it's very, very fast-paced.
It is, yeah.
You're not really supposed to dwell on these implausibilities.
No, of course.
I'm sure we can
holy
pick
shit,
some of them.
Right.
No, you're right. That is one that doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, there's a lot at the end of this film. I mean, the last half hour does go a little bit kind of crazy and silly.
Well, I think then it gets into this sort of regular, everyday, oh, this is about nuclear war. Of course, it's the Russians. But again, also, you know, there's a lot. I think there's stuff that they're introducing in this movie, false flag terrorism. You know, obviously this is, so what the Russians are planting sleeper children, okay, 30, 40 years back, so that they could assassinate the Russian president, which will then be blamed on the CIA, some rogue element within the CIA, and then another, you know, CIA plant, Lee Shriver, who's really FSB, he's going to then launch nukes on Mecca and Tehran in order to bring about what they refer to as Day X, which I guess would ultimately end with Russia dominating the world. But it's a lot of heavy ideas that I think now we're seeing it's much more socially acceptable to talk about false flag events if it's the Russians that did it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So again, it's sort of normalization of conspiracy culture or normalization of paranoid thinking.
Yeah, I think it's more just that. It's more just setting people up for a whole period in which people are terrified of Russia once more. And yeah, just this whole notion of like Russia going to take over the world. I mean, there are very few things that are certain in human history, but one of them is that no one invades Russia successfully. And the other one is Russia will never successfully take over the world. And a lot of that just comes down to geography. It's a very difficult place to invade, and it's a very difficult place for them to kind of expand out of. So they're never going to, you know, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, also just realistically looking, you know, they only get involved in places now that are either on their border or are their only allies. So obviously Ukraine and then Syria.
Yeah.
You know, like they didn't really care about Gaddafi. They never mention him. It's it's
Or
Assad.
Yemen, Pakistan, Iran.
Yep.
Iraq.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. They don't care about any of
Been
that.
causing no end of mischief
Yeah.
and chaos recently.
Yeah.
For the most part, Russia's just stood aside and said, "Well, you want to go and waste your money invading Iraq? Go right ahead. It's
Yeah, right.
no skin off our nose, really."
Yeah. You want to basically have an unending conflict in Yemen? Go ahead. Not a big deal to us.
Well, and it isn't.
No.
Why should they care? To be honest, not. I don't want to say it like that. That sounds outrageously cynical. But from their perspective,
Yeah. Right. There is no
for caring.
political benefit.
Yeah. Anyway, should we wrap this up on Salt? And
Yeah. I guess I had one other quick thing. My
Go on.
favorite. Two things. One, the president's Secret Service name is Geronimo. Wasn't that Bin Laden's?
that was the code name for "We've got Bin Laden." Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just thought that was
like
funny.
radio signal that they said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. And again, the talk about the perversion of things, the way that America just kills all the Indians and native people here, and then uses all of their names for like war, Apache helicopters, Tomahawk missiles.
Yeah.
There's just some freaky, weird occult thing going on there. But I like that, and then I loved my favorite line in the whole movie when Lee Schreiber is just killing everyone in the bunker. And the guy is, "I'm the national security advisor," and he just pops him right in the head as if, who cares, man? Like, that was a great line. I love that.
No, you're right.
That idea that's going to stop him. That's definitely going to stop him.
Yeah, this title that you have is just going to
Right? Yeah, you're exactly unelected official that no one's ever heard of. What did you think? How would you kind of sum up the movie?
It's very fun. I've got to say, it is a very, very enjoyable movie, and the stuff that they've snuck in there, we're assuming that this is stuff that the CIA encouraged them to sneak in there, is actually quite well hidden, I feel. It's not, again, this is partly due to pacing, because the film is so quick, and you're never really given a moment's peace, just like in a Bourne movie. You don't necessarily reflect on whether it's the implausibilities or it's the propagandistic elements. And so, as a propaganda movie, it's extremely successful, despite not having been enormously popular. I mean, it was quite popular and quite commercially successful, but nowadays it kind of flies under a lot of people's radars. But then, so did The Recruit. A lot of people don't really know that film, and that was what it was trying to do, I think it was enormously successful. Artistically, I mean, as much as anything else. And I would put this one in the same kind of category as that, as a movie that's, it was probably never going to be a blockbuster. It was never going to make $500 million or something, but it served a purpose, and it's quite an entertaining purpose that it served. So I find it hard to lay into this movie anywhere near as much as like Zero Dark 30 or some of the other ones that we've criticized, because it is a genuinely well-made film.
Well, I think too, the sort of interesting like final note that I had when I was watching it was that, what do we have at the finale? We have the rogue CIA/FSB agent is the only one who can defeat the evil Russians, which is definitely different from. That's an interesting idea to put out there in a CIA-sponsored film.
It is interesting that they would accept that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because and the whole thing is that it's not even really that the Russians are evil, because apparently we're meant to believe that the Russian president in this movie is a good guy. He's very close with this former vice president. He supposedly, him and the vice president sort of, changed the whole dynamic and opened up Russia to whatever, the international community. It's really this evil rogue unit within Russia that wants to, they seem to be operating as a parallel entity.
So just like you have the, rogue people within the CIA being a stereotype in a film now.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah, you're right. They have seemed to have sort of taken that and just transplanted it onto the FSB.
So I found that to be an interesting sort of a thing. And I wonder if that also was kind of like a nod to, listen, we all do fucked up shit when you get in this world. But that's kind of the game, And there is that weird thing in the spy world, like prisoner exchanges, spy exchanges. That's pretty commonplace. Yeah, they're going to kill a lot of people, but it's also like, all right, you got me, you bested me in this. There is that weird, I don't know, gentlemanly agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's played up in all spy, like John le Carré, all of,
Tom
George
Clancy.
Smiley. Yeah, exactly. Like Smiley always has this appreciation or respect for Carla and vice versa. And obviously then in the end of that series, Carla is taken in and he hands Smiley back the lighter that he stole from him, as a, you got me now,
Yeah, you won. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I wonder, that was something that I kind of took away. And then again, too, what's one of the last lines of Salt is that the new president, who I guess they held a special election. I don't know where, if the vice president is dead and the president is dead, they don't make it seem like it would. I forget who would be, was Secretary of State or something.
I don't actually know who's third in line, but yeah.
Speaker of the House.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Edit that out. And the new president is a Russian sleeper agent. That's how the movie ends. It's blah blah. Has been elected president whose family died in mysterious plane crash in Russia, which is how Angelina Jolie is inserted. She basically takes the place of this little girl whose parents are killed, American parents who are killed in a car crash. So again, it's, these evil, this select group of evil Russians is now got one of their own as the president, and only Angelina Jolie can protect us. But I think there's also saying something interesting where she's not CIA, she's not FSB, she's like her own thing. She's Salt.
I think it's probably, well, I suppose there's a number of different ways we can interpret that, but from a filmmaking point of view, that is partly about building up your brand.
Oh, of course.
They intended this to be a relatively long-running series with maybe 3, 4, 5 movies at that point. They may well have incorporated that in there just to, big her up as much as possible so that, they can try and turn her into a Jason Bourne. But at the same time, yeah, again, it's like in The November Man, where you have Russia actually ultimately joining NATO. You have this weird kind of convergence of these two. I don't know quite what to make of that from what would be the propaganda advantage to that. Maybe that's a question we can return to when we think of more examples of, entertainment that actually pursues it. But, I think we should probably wrap this one up soon. But, I just wanted to kind of have a quick look back on this second season that we've done and say, I know we've taken a somewhat more, experimental approach, a slightly less literal and structured approach to what we did in season 1. And I think it's been very interesting as a result. In some ways, it's been more enjoyable, I guess is what I'm saying. I've been less stressed about this.
Yeah, me too.
and frankly, the last 3-4 months, whatever, hasn't been a great time for me. And so this is one of those things I've really enjoyed doing. It's something that's been kind of a highlight. So yeah, man, I've really enjoyed it. And I want to thank all the guests. Naturally, all of them that we've had on have contributed something different, something strange, something unexpected to this series. And I wanted to thank you as well, because just like with the first season, it's been a lot of fun. It's been very interesting looking at these films with you.
Oh, of course, Tom. This is, we've been looking forward to doing this and for the whole year basically that we were kind of planning the second season. So yeah, thank you too for being there on the other end of the microphone. And all the sort of, we had lots of little issues, guests changing, and we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that, but I think it all kind of came together. And I think too the sort of this was a little bit more fun to do, because it wasn't, I think we prepared so much for the first season. There's a lot of kind of straightforward explaining, whereas this was a little bit more organic. And I think in a lot of ways we've kind of broadened out the audience a little bit.
Well, we've certainly broadened out the content. We've offered a different kind of perspective on this relationship, or some different perspectives on this relationship, whereas in the first season we were concentrating very much on how the CIA influences movies and why they get involved in them. Mm-hmm. In this, we've been looking, well, how does the movie industry respond to that? And how do they try and get into bed with the CIA in particular ways? And what's in it for them? So, yeah, I think this has been a great kind of companion to the first season. If you want if you want lots of facts, the first season is better. If you want a more broad perspective and range of perspectives, I think the second season is better. So, yeah, hopefully people listening kind of agree with that and have got a lot out of this. And, yeah, we're not sure about doing a third season. We do want to do a third season, don't get me wrong, but it is just a question of time, priorities, life getting in the way.
Yeah.
I did think, who knows, maybe we could do some live on your radio show?
Yeah, I think that might be the way to do it.
A kind of, I don't want to say a jazz version of the show because you hate jazz. But
yeah, me too.
Yeah, just, I mean, on this second season and on wrapping this whole thing up for, I don't know, until we do something on this again. Is there just anything else you'd like to add at this point?
Not really. I think we kind of covered everything. Just that, I hope that people listen to the podcast. I hope they get something out of it. Obviously we get a lot of recommendations on movies to do. I just know that we can't cover every single movie out there. And, we get that quite a lot, but no, I'm really excited to, I think the thing I want to leave people with is that we went in a different direction with this season. We could have made this very much like the same season that we started with, the first season. But I think we kind of made a conscious decision very early on to do something a little bit different. And I hope that people enjoy that. And I hope that this sort of opens up people to looking at this in a different way, because I think particularly with this topic, and this is something that Tom and I would say we're pretty well versed in this, it can become very formulaic. We've talked about it before when we're interviewed. What do you say about this? It's very difficult to explain this concept. And I think that we're kind of figuring out how to kind of broaden this, or how to kind of talk about this in a different way. So that's what I really liked about this season. And I think we're going to kind of continue that. Tom and I have some ideas for other ways of doing this, and particularly maybe like in a documentary sort of a style, and not a straight podcast series. But yeah, I just hope that everyone enjoyed this. I hope that that you got something out of it, and I think it definitely is. The series is changing, and I like that. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I thought about the radio show. Maybe is that would be doing it differently again. So we can't promise anything. We're not promising anything because we don't know quite what's going to happen. But hopefully, we will return to this topic with. There are plenty more films. There are plenty more angles and ways of exploring this that we have yet to really get into properly. So hopefully we will be able to. But I guess in the meantime, there's not really an awful lot else to say except, thank you all for listening to the CIA in Hollywood.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, not just for this episode, but for the entire series of the CIA and Hollywood. If you enjoyed this and you would like to hear some more of our work, you can always visit my website, PorkinsPolicyReview.com, and you can always visit Tom's website, SpyCulture.com. And once again, I'd like to thank all of the guests that joined us for this second season of the CIA and Hollywood. Thank you to all of the listeners out there and for all of the support that we have gotten on this second season. Of course, if anyone wants to help Tom and I in the work that we do and help to expand this podcast series in particular, you can always donate to our Patreon campaigns. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and hopefully we will be talking to you very soon.